representative of the American people. This whole notion, the idea, the experiment in self-government relates directly to the ability of all Americans to have the unfettered right to vote. But voting rights is under attack across America. Republicans, in many ways, have decided that voter suppression is an electoral strategy. That is unacceptable, unconscionable, and un-American. And we want to make voter suppression unlawful in every way possible, which is why the John Robert Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act is so critical. We stand behind it. We're thankful for the leadership of Terry Sewell. More than 200 Democrats are original co-sponsors of this legislation. We are unified on the issue of protecting the voting rights of every single American all across the country, and we ask Republicans to join us. Voting rights is not a Democratic issue or Republican issue, it's an American issue. And we should all stand behind the John Robert Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, make sure that it passes the House, passes the Senate, can get signed into law so we can keep our great American democracy going into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. We bring to the mic now another amazing Brooklynite, the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, Yvette Clarke.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Sewell. I am Congresswoman Yvette D. Clarke, chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, and I proudly represent New York's 9th Congressional District, which is in central and southwest Brooklyn. I want to thank my esteemed colleague, Representative Terry Sewell. Her leadership has been tremendous and unrelenting in reintroducing the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act in the 119th Congress, as well as all of my colleagues assembled here, the leadership of the Democratic Caucus and the leadership of our affinity caucuses. Voting rights is and has always been the CBC's North Star. The late Congressman John Lewis said, "The vote is precious. It is almost sacred. It is the most powerful, nonviolent tool we have in a democracy." Right now, as my colleagues have indicated, that tool is under threat. At a time when our democracy is under constant siege, we must do all we can to protect the sacred right to vote. As we speak, extremist Republicans at the local, state, and national levels are running the table with every tactic in their arsenal to keep black people from the ballot box. To date, hundreds of bills to restrict voting access have been introduced in states around the country with the aim of closing polling locations, curbing early voting, voting by mail, and imposing stricter voter ID requirements. These efforts are coordinated. They are well-funded, and they are targeting our communities. The question now is, what are we going to do to stop it? For generations, we have marched, fought, and even died for the right to vote. And it is a shame that partisan politics have brought us to this point that we cannot agree that access to the ballot box should be a right afforded to every American. Since the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was enacted, it has been reauthorized 5 times with large bipartisan majorities, most recently in 2006, as was indicated by Congresswoman Sewell, when it passed unanimously in the U.S. Senate, 98-0, and was signed by Republican President George W. Bush. We cannot and will not allow MAGA extremists to tear down our democracy. The CBC will continue to fight against the voter suppression that plagues our country and impedes access to the ballot box, particularly in black communities. So enough is enough. Protecting Americans' access to the ballot box should not be a partisan issue. The CBC is calling on Republicans to work with Democrats to pass the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act to restore and modernize the protections of the VRAA to prevent states from erecting new barriers to the ballot box. With that, as we say, I yield back.
Thank you. Congressman Adriano Espaillat, Chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. Thank you, Terry, our Leader Jeffries, and the Democratic leadership team. One person, one vote. What a great concept of democracy, of the spinal cord of our democracy. One person, one vote. A very simple concept. My vote is just as good as anybody's vote. A rich person's vote is just as good as a poor person's vote. So this is right at the center of our ability to restore democracy every so often, every time we have an election. And so this is so important that we continue to support the one person, one vote concept that is right at the center of any chapters in history where we have seen an enhancement of democracy. So when women were given the right to vote, it was one person, one vote. When different initiatives were passed to facilitate people to vote, it was one person, one vote. So it's mind-boggling that today we see effort after effort to try to stifle, to try to put roadblocks on one person, one vote. And this, the John Lewis Voting Rights Enhancement Act, is long overdue. In the past year, at least 9 states have enacted 18 restrictive voting laws, 9 states across the country. With this troubling trend, the Voting Rights Advancement Act is more important now than ever before. Republicans are trying to roll back progress with bills like the SAFE Act, which would require Americans to provide proof of citizenship. It's already a crime to vote, and you're not a citizen. It's a felony. So there's no need to reinvent the wheel. The laws are already in the book. Studies have shown that 1 out of 10 adult citizens, or 21.3 million eligible voters, say they could not quickly gather their documents required under the SAFE Act. Imagine if I told you right now, go get me your passport. It's going to take you a half a day. Imagine if I tell you, go get me your citizenship papers. It will take some endeavor to do that. It's already a felony to vote if you're not a citizen. So historically, Latinos are among those disproportionately affected by voter suppression laws. It is not a coincidence that places with growing Latino populations are also seeing an increase in voting restrictions, including Arizona, Texas, Wisconsin, and Florida. Latinos are the fastest growing share of the electorate. It's a very young community. 1.4 million Latinos become legally eligible to vote every single year. More than 1 million Latino citizens turn 18 one every 30 seconds. 1 every 30 seconds. So I can count to 30 and one member of the Latino community turn 18. This is how powerful the concept of one person, one vote is. And so let's pass this bill. Our leadership, our Democratic leadership is fully behind it. It is good for America. It is good for democracy. En español. Estamos aquí para apoyar el concepto de una persona, un voto y apoyar este proyecto de ley que nuestra colega
We're listening here to Representative Espaillat is making some remarks in Spanish, just reiterating what he spoke to as several of these lawmakers were introducing the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act that was earlier this week. On your screen, you do see that we have a live picture over in Birmingham, Alabama, as we continue our coverage on the 60th anniversary of the Summer Bridge March and how that really changed the civil rights movement and became a pivotal moment. We're stepping away for a brief commercial break. We continue with more next.
One of these friends can order whatever she wants from the menu. The other has food allergies. You do your best to avoid food allergens, but accidents can still happen. Xolair is an FDA-approved injection proven to significantly reduce allergic reactions from accidental food exposures. Taken once or twice a month, it focuses on the source of food allergy reactions. For adults and children as young as 1, Xolair is effective in reducing allergic reactions to a single or multiple foods.
Don't use if you are allergic to Xolair. Xolair may cause a severe life-threatening allergic reaction called anaphylaxis. Tell your doctor if you ever had anaphylaxis. Get help right away if you have trouble breathing or if you have swelling of your throat or tongue. Xolair should not be used for the emergency treatment of allergic reactions, including anaphylaxis. Xolair is for maintenance use to reduce allergic reactions, including anaphylaxis, while avoiding food allergens. Serious side effects such as cancer, fever, muscle aches and rash, parasitic infection, or heart and circulation problems have been reported.
Help reduce food allergy reactions if an accident happens. Ask an allergist about Xolair.
Experience the wonders of the Mexican Caribbean at Nisuk Resort and Spa, where paradise is personal. Nisuk is a world to discover into itself. Enjoy our white sand beaches. Indulge in ultimate serenity at our spa by ISPA. Savor in our oasis of culinary delights and explore the magic of our Imagine region. Day or night, indoors or out, something wonderful awaits.
When it comes to big personalities, Dr. Phil's Merit TV has the biggest and the best. Steve Harvey,
Jackpot!
Nancy Grace,
Busted.
and the man himself, Dr. Phil.
Well, hello!
It's the best of Dr. Phil's Merit TV on Roku.
Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. You are taking a live look at the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., where earlier this week we heard from Democratic lawmakers introducing the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Let's continue to listen in to those remarks.
Everyone. I am Congresswoman Grace Meng, Chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, and I want to thank my friend, Congresswoman Sewell, for once again championing this bill in memory of our beloved friend and civil rights icon, the late Congressman John Lewis. And I want to thank our caucus leadership, from Leader Jeffries on, for showing such great support for this important bill. As we commemorate the 60th anniversary of Bloody Sunday, we are reminded of the legends of the civil rights movement for people like John Lewis, Amelia Boynton Robinson, Reverend Hosea Williams, and so many others who marched at great risk to their own safety to ensure that every American could exercise their right to vote. And it is their bravery that led to the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, a landmark piece of legislation that prohibits racial discrimination in voting. But as we've heard, this fight is far from over. The right to vote is currently under attack by anti-democratic extremists across our nation. 29 states have enacted restrictive voting laws that criminalize people who provide assistance with voter registration and deny voters multilingual ballots and translators at the polls. These draconian laws were designed to disenfranchise communities of color. Over a third of the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander community has limited English proficiency, and denying multilingual support is nothing short of silencing their voices. This is not the first time our community has faced discrimination at the ballot box before. In Alabama, a city council member said of Asian American voters, if they couldn't speak good English, they possibly were not American citizens, and forced members of our community to complete a paper ballot and have their ballot vouched for by another registered voter. In Washington, an individual challenged the right to vote for 1,500 people of mainly Asian and Hispanic descent, whose names, he said, have no basis in the English language. And now President Trump has taken action to restrict multilingual support and language access for our communities, which could further disenfranchise Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander voters. We cannot let this stand, and that's why I'm proud to co-sponsor this John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act to strengthen the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and protect access to the ballot box. I'm committed to doing my part to ensure our country's system of governance by the people and for the people continues for generations to come. Thank you, and I yield back.
I want to thank all of our speakers today. What you see before you is the entire House Democratic Caucus in support of the John Robert Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. We know that freedom is not free, that it was paid for on the backs of many of the forefathers and foremothers who fought, died, prayed, marched for the freedoms that we all now enjoy. And it is House Democrats that stand firmly before you, knowing that the power of the vote is sacred. We are emboldened by the legacy of John Robert Lewis. We know that his fight has now become our fight. The cause of those foot soldiers 60 years ago is now our cause too. And we will be resolute and determined in our effort to make sure that we fully restore the protections of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. With that, I'll open it up for questions. Yes.
Two. First of all, for members of leadership here, is this going to be the first bill you take up in 2027, back to the House? And then secondly, on the protests last night, I know leadership and council folks not be disrupted. What is your response to the disruptions?
The John Robert Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act will be a top priority for House Democrats because it's central to the integrity of our democracy.
We're asking questions and answering questions regarding the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and the upcoming 60th anniversary of the Selma to Montgomery March. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for doing this. I'm curious on how you all plan to message around this bill, considering that Republican leadership is prioritizing the STATE Act, which I know a few of you mentioned. How are you planning on messaging, maybe whipping around that for members of leadership in the general context of the political climate of immigration right now?
Well, first of all, I think that it is truly telling that the entire House Democratic membership is signed on to this bill. This is clearly a priority for House leadership and for the House Democrats, period. We know that we're fighting an uphill battle, but what we know is that we can't give up. We can be mad, we can be upset, but we have to stay determined. If there's anything that John Lewis and those foot soldiers taught us, taking a page from their playbook, we have to be resolute, we have to be determined, we have to be consistent and persistent in our efforts to fight for the right to vote, and we will continue to do that. Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering, since it's been 5 times that this vote has been revisited, is there anything that can be done to make it permanent so that this doesn't happen again?
Well, first it has to be passed into law. So I think what we realized in the Shelby versus Holder decision is that only Congress can actually put back the full protections of the Voting Rights Act. What the Shelby versus Holder decision said is that when we passed it in 2006, we did so under old laws or an old formula. And so what the Voting Rights Act of the John Robert Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act does is it talks about a modern day formula with a look back of 25 years. So we're looking back 1997. and going forward. We're not looking back to the 60s or 70s. And we still see rampant voter suppression. It's running amok now that the Shelby versus Holder decision has gutted a key provision. That provision allowed for the Justice Department to pre-clear laws, state laws, before they became into effect. So we know that we have work to do, and we're doing that work. We're very confident that if we continue to be persistent in our efforts, we not only have we introduced it 5 times, this is the 6th time, but we passed it twice. We passed it twice out of the House. And so we know that the groundswell of public sentiment matters, and we're appealing to the American public to continue to join with us in this fight for better protections for voting rights. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Several House Democrats have said on some other legislative priorities that it just takes 3 House Republicans to join you all on advancing some of the House Democratic priorities. Is this a bill that you use as 3 Republicans joining you all to advance something that you say is so sacred, such as voting rights? And also, can you give us a preview of what folks can expect to see in Alabama this weekend as well?
Well, we're obviously, the slim majority that exists in the House for House Republicans does mean that if we can pick off 3 Republicans to join us in this effort, and frankly, this is what this press conference is an appeal to our Republican colleagues to join us in our effort to fight for protections of the voting rights. I look forward to welcoming not only members of Congress, but ordinary Americans. If anything, what happened on Bloody Sunday taught us is that ordinary Americans working together collectively can achieve extraordinary social change. John Lewis was 27 years old when he, on a backpack, and he and Hosea Williams and others led that march from Selma to Montgomery. What happened on Bloody Sunday was a travesty, and the whole world watched as Black Americans simply, peacefully marched across a bridge to aggrieve their government for the right to vote, a simple right to vote, which is a right of citizenship in this country. And so this Sunday, I look forward to welcoming our Leader Jeffries, our caucus chair, so many who are standing here, leaders in our caucus, but also ordinary Americans as we gather to pay commemoration and honor to the 60th anniversary of Bloody Sunday. Faith in Politics, which John Lewis started many years ago, will be leading a delegation of 300, including 40 members of Congress and senators, to Selma, Birmingham, and Montgomery. And on Sunday, look forward to having a commemorative march led by Jubilee, which is an organization, a group based out of Selma that has been doing this year after year after year after year. We look forward to welcoming folks to churches in Selma, and we fully expect, as we did with the 50th, to have a commemorative march of thousands of people crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge. A full show of support for our democracy. Yes?
Quick follow-up on this question. You only need 3 Republicans to pick off to have this particular legislation passed, and you have to really appeal to those Republicans given the slim majority, and condolences to Mr. Turner's family.
Yes.
Absolutely. Now, you guys may have to look a little harder given the time of the special elections. That being said, given what happened last night, Republicans are very angry about the behavior. You had the kid who overcame cancer, you had the widow and the son of the slain officer, the hostage from Russia who just came over.
We're listening here to several Democratic lawmakers answering some questions from the press. This was earlier this week as they introduced the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. And all of this, of course, came just before we observed the 60th anniversary of the Selma Bridge March. And it's what our coverage has been focused on for the last several hours. Thank you all for being with us here on this Sunday, March 9th. My name is Carla Hara, and especially thank you for tuning in to some of this coverage that we had for the Selma Bridge March, excuse me. We are going to step away for our final commercial break of this hour. My time here on the desk is done. On the other side, we are going to pivot to some more of your top stories of the day, looking ahead to next week and what we're following very closely. And my colleague Andy Mack will be guiding you through, of course, all of those major headlines and any live events that we get from around the world. I'm going to leave you with this live now look over in Washington, D.C. A gorgeous shot there in the distance as you do see the National Mall. We'll be right back.
Get a limited time Comcast Business 5-year price lock guarantee and save.
Experience the wonders of the Mexican Caribbean at Nisuk Resort and Spa, where paradise is personal. Nisuk is a world to discover into itself. Enjoy our white sand beaches. Indulge in ultimate serenity at our spa by Espa. Savor in our oasis of culinary delights and explore the magic of our Imagine region. Day or night, indoors or out, something wonderful awaits.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Two different levels I cannot relate. You never win if you playing it safe. It's all a game until you get played. You speaking so loud with nothing to say. Hey, I'm betting it down on me. No cap. They said they ride for me, and they talk so bad on me. I know there's no friends in this business. That's why I keep my family close. Let's go. Put in work and secure the bag, and then take it back.
This is Peyton, 19, from Pulseless, not breathing.
Did you give her drugs?
Oh, dude, I didn't do anything.